Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at a full secondary Hannover in 2025. And alongside that, this new F key charge. It's updated. And in fact, this one is a buff. With the Satsuma, I wasn't quite sure if it was a buff or a nerf. But with Hannover, this is definitely a buff. Sure, you do have to hit the target now, which again, I think is an amazing change to these F keys. It should have never really rewarded you for missing the target. I think that's fair to say. But now with Hannover, and its, let's be honest, less than stellar accuracy on its main guns, we have to hit the target to actually gain progress here. That could be a bit of an issue. So how is this a buff then? Well, you also gain charge on this F key by hitting enemy ships with your secondaries. 1.5% per secondary shell hit. So you can imagine how quickly that can stack when you're in secondary range. So while I found Satsuma could decay and lose its F key charge very quickly if you missed a salvo, Hannover is much easier to maintain this progress towards our F key, and especially at close range, it is back up so quickly. And as a small refresher on Hannover, this ship gets 12.5 kilometer secondary range. And with this F key, you gain 20% better reload as well as 12% more range. So we're getting up to 14 kilometer range when we use this F key. So we're using it early here to get our secondaries started on this main as he's pushing in. A really useful way to use these secondaries, because manual secondaries as a commander skill requires a bit of time to get the full accuracy. So you notice we're missing quite a lot of these secondary shells. So we gotta wait for that accuracy to come into play. But crucially, using this F key means we're missing out on some of that DPM. Do you want to use the F key right away to start building progress towards your secondary accuracy? Or do you wait until you've already built that secondary accuracy and then use it for more DPM? Well, now that we can charge this F key so quickly, I think it's a pretty easy choice. You want to use it anytime you can start using your secondaries early. Maybe not when people are going to stay outside of your standard 12.5 kilometer range, but look at this charge. It comes back so quickly that you just want to spam it here early. Luchin's buff procs as well, so further DPM increase on these secondaries, and it's back already. And we use it again. Absolutely wild. Hannover, kind of nice, and a double Citadel on the Verity there. Absolutely wild. This is a full secondary build, so we're not building for these main guns at all, and you're going to see that here. Very random. Sometimes we're going to get the insane 30k slaps like that, which is 2 of our turrets, and other times we're just going to miss everything. That's what you have to deal with when you're running a full secondary battleship like this. And Verity's still within our secondary. I mean, look at that. It's absolutely insane. The DPM, the hitting DPM on Hannover is not the best in the game. At 10 kilometers, things like Schlieffen are way up there, 56,000 hitting DPM. Hannover's quite a bit further down, 41,000. It's still decent, don't get me wrong. They pen 32 millimeters of armor, so these secondaries are very powerful still. We don't even need IFHE to pen 32 millimeters of armor. But the reason we don't have as much hitting DPM is these more standard German battleships have somewhat of a middle ground between Schlieffen, Ohio secondary accuracy and the base battleship secondary accuracy. So at 10 kilometers, ships like Schlieffen have 360 meters of base secondary accuracy, and a standard battleship would have 600 meters. So Hannover, being this middle ground, has 465 meters. That's why, even though this has impressive number of secondaries and reload, it doesn't quite have the hitting DPM, and that's the most important bit. It doesn't really matter how many secondaries you fire if you're not really hitting them. And a ship like Libertad has the pen, and it has that base accuracy of 360 meters. So that's why Libertad is so insane. Hannover could be up there, certainly, if it also had that base secondary accuracy. But it doesn't. It's a middle ground. It still does very, very well, though. Do not get me wrong. These main guns are also incredible. The firing angles are amazing. One of my main gripes with all of these German battleships is their main guns' firing angles. This ship, though, 29 degrees forward and back to fire all of your guns. Absolutely amazing. Something like the GK, it's over 40 degrees when you're facing forward for those rear guns. Absolutely insane to try and get that fired while maintaining proper angling. So that allows Hannover to be much tankier. This ship is awesome. Awesome still to play. But we do have a bit more passive meta to deal with. So that can be the challenge for a Hannover. It is a bit fortunate, I got to say. Okay, this is not just a skill thing. This is a lot of luck involved with getting a match like this one. I will have to say that, guys. Not every match looks like this. In fact, 90% of them do not look like this. Most of the time, you're getting focused down, you're getting carrier focused, spotted from long range, and you're losing all of your HP early. So, Hanover is still tricky to use these days. Gets farmed down very, very quickly. But in the right scenarios, this ship is still amazing. And we haven't even talked about the other buff that the Hannover received. This Hydro is now a 7-kilometer Hydro. I did not get the opportunity to use it to Hydro someone in smoke. They did not change the torpedo acquisition range either, so it's still 4 kilometers. So this only applies to seeing ships earlier in smoke or catching DDs off guard. If people aren't used to it, then maybe there's some destroyers that have better than 6-kilometer detection, let's say like a Shima 5.6. Typically, Shima players know to stay outside of 6 kilometers, not use their full detection against these German ships. But with a Hannover now, as well as Clausewitz, 7-kilometer Hydro range could be a bit of a surprise there. So really cool to see that. Not that I managed to use it at all in the games that I played to get this video, but still very interesting. Primarily, I'm sure that change is not meant for Clausewitz or Hannover, but rather for the Super Z52 that they're trying out right now with 6.2 kilometer detect and a 7-kilometer Hydro. That sounds like a pretty awful ship to fight against, don't you think? Yeah, so we'll see how that goes in testing. Hopefully that gets changed, but I mean, Stealth Hydro, that's a lot. But for now, Hannover gets a small improvement from that as well. Already up to 200,000 damage in this one, and look at that dispersion. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. That is, I mean, that is just the definition of skill issue, right? Man, if only I could aim better. So yeah, we're going to have an absolutely insane game here in spite of Hannover dispersion. And maybe that's unfair. Perhaps that's unfair to Hannover, where we're calling that the ship's fault. Maybe that's more game mechanics, or aim bugs more likely. Unfortunately, still 10 years, or nearly 10 years after this game's released, we still have a ton of bugs in this game that we have to deal with. But never fear, we have the AI Secondaries here to save us. In this one, it certainly is. The amount of damage we're getting in on this Missouri is absolutely wild. Notice we've used up all of our heals at this point, but we're on 1.9 million potential damage. And we have a skill that on 2 million potential damage gives us another heal back. So we're low. We're just barely surviving here. Creeping up to 300,000 damage in this game. And if we can avoid one more salvo from this Missouri to not eat 12,000 damage, we're going to be living. And there it is. We managed to live, and there's our heal instantly off cooldown. You don't even have to wait for the cooldown if you've already used up all of your heals with this 3-point skill to give you an extra heal on 2 million potential damage. Absolutely amazing skill to have. Very rare that I get to proc it like this, but always very cool when I can. 4 kills, 300,000 damage. Can we get the secure, professional kill secure on the Vermont here? Teammates have done a very good job this game. It was not looking very good for us, but we've managed to pull it back. And yes, we get the Kraken unleashed. Maybe not the most deserved Kraken there on the Vermont, I'll admit, but hey, we will take it. Nearly 310,000 damage and a Kraken in a Hannover in 2025. Here I am complaining about the passive meta. Oh, I'm gonna do pre-kited Satsuma games. No, no, no. The brawling is still there. Assuming you don't get a carrier game, assuming you don't get the HE spam focused game. There's a lot. There's a lot that went right for us there. Don't you worry. What about Ocean with no destroyers on our team? How is that going to work out? Well, we've had a rough start to this match where we've been kind of just been HE farmed out by a buffed Zhao on the enemy team who's been playing well, as well as a Rhode Island which has small caliber guns, but pretty strong HE and fire chance, and it's hard to miss a Hanover. So this is a bit of the challenge with playing a full secondary Hanover. How do you deal with these longer range games? And I'll be honest with you, it's very difficult. I think the best thing you can do is just play far enough back that your overmatch is your advantage here, and not overcommit to try and get your secondaries in play early on. That's something I do quite a lot. I'm not patient enough as a player a lot of the time when I'm playing these secondary battleships. I get frustrated that I'm not able to use the full extent of a secondary build in a lot of these games, and I overcommit and I die early, and then I'm more frustrated. So I'm playing badly because I'm a little bit annoyed, I suppose, and that doesn't help anything. So playing a little more passive here. Notice we've spent most of this game just at max range here, or very, very far range here, not even close to getting our secondaries actually playing in this match. But we're still gonna have a good game because we've waited, we've been patient, and we can make the Hanover work in the late game. You do need a close match though. You have to deal with blowouts at times where you maybe play this safe role and then your team just evaporates, or the enemy team evaporates, and you still don't get to play. But maybe playing patient gives me a few more matches like this where we can wait for those late game pushes from our team or the enemy team and still have some fun at the end. Perhaps. Now I gotta talk a little bit more about this changed F key and its instructions. In looking more closely at Hanover, I might have been wrong about Satsuma. It's a little bit hard to tell. What does number of adjustment firing salvos required to activate combat instructions? What does that even mean? That was what these combat instructions were described as previously. Now, it didn't have to do with hits on target. It had to do with hits in the general vicinity of an enemy ship, which included splashing around them. Nice little citadel there on the Rhode Island. Hanover guns are no joke. They can hit pretty hard when they hit, I suppose. So previously, we used to get progress on these combat instructions for missing targets, which I didn't like. But when I looked into what Hanover said, it said it gave me 5% progress per main battery shell hit in that target radius. And it was like a 1.5 kilometer radius that you had to hit within a spotted target. So does that mean each shell is only giving 5% per progress point? Well, that means then this new 10% per direct hit now means we're getting double the value out of a direct hit than the previous splashes would. So maybe these are buffs across the board. Maybe Satsuma was like that as well. Maybe Satsuma got a buff as well in that case. It's hard to know exactly what this progression progress means when it comes to adjustment firing salvos. Maybe that's about shooting one turret. Maybe that's about shooting one shell. I don't know. It's kind of tricky sometimes with the way Wargaming words things, but I will say I stand behind Satsuma feeling like it's harder to maintain an F key charge when you're in the progress of building it up. Once you've got it, of course, it never decays. But if you miss a single salvo with Satsuma, it all goes away, that progress. So I think that is a bit of a nerf to Satsuma. It felt a little easier to maintain half progress towards it with Satsuma before. Whereas with Hanover now, it is just a straight buff. I think this is a straight buff to the ship. Look at how quickly we get back to it again, man. It's fun. It is really fun, I gotta say. When you get in range like this, our patience has paid off in this match. We've got ourselves a Patrie to farm, and I mean, poor Patrie in these scenarios, right? Our main guns overmatch him everywhere. Our secondaries full pen him everywhere. The damage is absolutely wild here. Patrie has some pretty solid main guns, of course, but that's really all it has as a super ship. It does not have the F keys. It does not have the armor. So Patrie can be dangerous, don't get me wrong, on a flank, but at close range like this, it is not a fair fight at all for the poor Patrie, man. It is very difficult to fight at Hanover. And we got 227 already in this game. Notice the instant we get in secondary range, we just burst up a ton of damage. The ship is still very scary at close range. We were talking about that a little bit earlier about Hanover, or more specifically Libertad, secondary ships. The way to counter them, you got to stay outside of their secondary range. And I think Hanover is the same. But this one has some overmatch to deal with as well. So even if the main gun shells aren't the most accurate, that Overmatch is very, very strong and a major element of why Hanover can feel so powerful. Even when old ships like GK, I mean, Preussen has some Overmatch, I suppose. Maybe it's not fair to compare it to GK all the time. The Overmatch helps out a lot of these ships because they just do not have the consistent accuracy. So you just need that pressure of Overmatch, I suppose. It's unfortunate because Overmatch is such an unfun mechanic to fight against. It feels bad to be angling, playing well, in my opinion, and taking so much damage like that. But some of these ships, I guess they rely on it. I don't know. It feels kind of bad to say that at times, but it's kind of true. Well, without Overmatch, I mean, a lot of these battleships kind of rely on that for a lot of their damage output. Maybe it would require changing a whole bunch of mechanics to actually remove Overmatch or change Overmatch. Too much work, perhaps. But again, 260 in this one. Absolutely wild Hanover games. I had a surprising amount of fun with the full secondary build. I was not expecting that. I was expecting this to be pretty difficult. And yet, I think I got pretty lucky on Matchmaker, of course, to allow me to even get in secondary range here. 120k on a Patrie? Oh my goodness, poor guy. And if you notice right at the end there, I had an opportunity to hydro that Kitakazi. Unfortunately, I popped it a little bit too early, and it ran out just as we were getting close to his smoke. So, still have to try and find an opportunity for this 7-kilometer hydro. It is very powerful. I'm not sure if we need hydros reaching that range. Certainly stealth hydro, a little bit spooky there. But we're not going to talk about hypothetical test ships right now. Notice that detection of torps, though, did not get buffed alongside detection of ships. So, keep that in mind as well. Maybe that would have been a more impactful change. Hanover is gigantic and terrible for maneuverability. So I would have rather had one more kilometer on detection of torps, probably, rather than the ships thing there for this ship. But hey, it's still a nice change. And more importantly, this F key, man, that secondary battery shell gaining you charge on this ship is so insane. It is awesome how quickly you can charge up this F key. No longer are you in a brawl and waiting on your main guns to slowly charge up this F key again. It is back very, very quickly. And I suppose the other interesting thing is when your F key runs out and you have to recharge it again, the secondaries already in the air, which again have that 20% reload time bonus still because they were fired previously, and that range bonus will also be gaining you F key charge while they're still hitting, right? So pretty cool change. And this is the build that I was running here, by the way. Very, very dumb build for random battles, but if you get the right matchmaker, it can work out. I got pretty lucky, though. Played well, I think. I played pretty well, if I do say so myself. But it does require you to get the perfect matchmaker to actually use a build like this one. So overmatching guns, very useful, but these secondaries did a ton of work for us when we finally got in range. I love the turret angles on the Hannover, so much nicer than the other German battleships. And this secondaries with this F key, pretty amazing. If you haven't seen it before, the armor layout here is pretty powerful, but it is a 50 millimeter deck. There's some ships that do pen 50 with their HE and can farm you down rather quickly. Your superstructure is maybe the biggest one in the entire game, only 19 millimeters here. You need fire prevention. Sometimes I'm greeding out not running fire prevention on some of these ships. It's probably the wrong play, let's be honest. But I try it and often get punished for it. But here you just have to. There is no trying to greed and not take fire prevention here. Look at how big it is. I mean, do you really want 2 fire locations on a ship this size? No. You got to limit that to 1. So when it comes to Hanover, you just need that. But hey, managed to make it work here with the Hanover in 2025 with the full secondary build. Had a lot of fun. Hope you guys enjoyed. And definitely check this thing out. Maybe play it in some asymmetric or operations, something like that. Brawl game modes. It's going to perform much better if you have the opportunity, because you're just more likely to get in closer range gameplay. And that F key charging so fast, this ship might be insane in operations now that I'm thinking about it. You just almost constantly have your F key available when you're in secondary range. That could be fun. I might need to try that, actually. Anyways, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.